Holy City Center Radio is episode 273, and I am your host, Christian Sanger. Today is Wednesday, July 10th, 2024. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the show. Glad to have you here. Hope you had an amazing weekend and your week is off to a good start. I also hope you're staying cool. It has been toasty out there most days. I know I'm not telling you anything new. I'm just hoping you all are staying cool as best as you can. And hopefully those electricity bills won't be too high despite ACs constantly running. But in any event, got a good show for you, some news to catch you up on. Not too much going on here in my world. Been pretty quiet, nothing really interesting to report on. However, my family is coming to town. My parents specifically will be arriving to spend some time here with me, and I'm very excited to see them, as well as their two dogs, one of which is brand new. I haven't met her yet, so very excited about that as well. And I'll be sure to let y'all know if we end up, going anywhere, whether it's out to eat or anything around town that's worth reporting back on. But just excited to have them here, whether we go out or just lay low. So looking forward to that. Otherwise, same old, just doing work, doing this show. And speaking of that, let's get into the latest news. First up, we've got an update involving Boeing. They agreed on Sunday to plead guilty to a felony charge of conspiring to defraud the federal government over two fatal crashes of their 737 MAX back in 2018 and 2019. They have reportedly also agreed as part of this plea deal where they're going to plead guilty to the felony, but they're also going to pay an updated total fine of $487.2 million and then invest a similar amount over 3 years for more compliance and safety programs. So, yes, they're going to plead guilty to a felony charge. They're not going to have to go to trial because of the plea, but they are going to be paying a hefty fine as well as being forced essentially as part of this deal to put basically that exact same total into programs and processes, whatever it may be, to make sure they're doing better in terms of safety and being in compliance. Now, those two crashes I mentioned happened over a year period, but in total, 346 people died in what many people thought could have been preventable crashes. So as I said, the deal would make it so that Boeing will avoid a criminal trial. Something I'm sure they're happy that they won't have to go forward. It could have been a much bigger penalty if they didn't agree to this plea deal. Now, it still has to be approved by a judge, so it's not 100% official yet, but there's been no indication that it wouldn't be approved. So according to the Associated Press, federal prosecutors gave Boeing the choice last week of entering that guilty plea and paying a fine as part of its sentence or facing a trial on the felony criminal charge of conspiring to defraud the United States. So like I said, they just decided taking this plea, they were surely going to be found guilty. It certainly seems that way, and they must have been getting the same impression and decided this was the proper route to go. More importantly, yes, pleading guilty, taking responsibility, paying fines, all that stuff is all well and good. But the real test and the real thing that they have to do is make sure these situations don't happen again. They actually have to show that they're improving their processes, their procedures, quality checks, compliance, all of that. That's the most important part. All of this is a moot point if they don't actually make any big changes. And we've seen over the last few months where, yes, some whistleblowers are still coming forward for, things that have happened in the past, but they have also self-reported some issues, which, that part of the issue was they weren't self-reporting or not doing so appropriately. So hopefully they are moving in the right direction. I'll be sure to keep you updated if anything else comes out of this deal. Now we switch gears, but another update to a story that we've been talking about for a while. This is related to that horrible crash that happened on Folly Beach that took the life of a bride shortly after her wedding. This is still very much working its way through the courts in different ways. And one of the ways we've talked about, putting aside the driver who's been charged with, multiple charges. I mean, that's the best way I know how to say it, but multiple charges related to DUI, resulting in death and bodily injury. So this has to do with the restaurants. You may remember that restaurants can be held accountable in situations like this if it's determined that they overserved a patron, didn't do their due diligence in making sure that person didn't drive after leaving their establishment. Although some of those businesses agreed to a settlement, as you may remember, one restaurant here in town has been trying to get out of this case, saying that they shouldn't even be part of it. That restaurant is Taco Boy. Unfortunately for them, a judge recently denied their request to be released from that lawsuit. As I said, that lawsuit alleges that Taco Boy, among other restaurants, contributed to the death of a bride on her wedding night. So that woman, Samantha Miller, her groom has sued the popular restaurant as well as some others, and did so in the weeks after, the driver slammed a rented black Toyota Camry into a golf cart, carrying the couple away from the wedding reception. And this all happened back in April 28th of 2023. The driver of that Camry, Jamie Komorowski, supposedly briefly tapped her brakes before rear-ending the newlyweds and two other family members when she was going 65 miles per hour in a 25-mile-per-hour zone. The cart was thrown 100 yards. Miller died at the scene. She was still wearing her white wedding dress. Meanwhile, her husband, as well as the two other people that were in the golf cart, suffered injuries of varying degrees, but ultimately survived the accident. So Samantha Miller's husband, whose name is Eric Hutchinson, he alleged through his attorneys that several bars negligently served a lot of alcohol to Komorowski before she drove away in a drunken haze. Now, Taco Boy has been brought into this because they had hired Komorowski just days before the crash. She was a new hire who was still in training. Now, here's kind of the important part and why Taco Boy was trying to get dismissed from this whole lawsuit. On the day of the accident, she did not work at the venue. She did not step foot on the premises or consume alcohol offered by other Taco Boy employees. So that alone, of course, the restaurant's like, why are we part of this? She didn't come in here, whether working or otherwise, and no employees at any locations, no Taco Boy employees met her at any of the other locations she went to and offered her any drink. So why are we part of this? So they filed this motion to dismiss. That was on July 8th, but it was ultimately denied, as I mentioned, by the judge. The argument from Hutchinson's attorney, whose name is Danny Dalton, they said that Komorowski was reportedly told she had to go to a mandatory employee function that was being held at a nearby bar. That bar is called the Drop-In. She was told she needed to go there and had to drink with her supervisors and coworkers in order to get the good shifts and tables. So that's how Taco Boy got brought into this. Although Komorowski wasn't at their actual restaurant, Hutchinson's attorneys are saying, hey, no, she didn't go to the restaurant itself, but she did go to a function related to the business where she was essentially told she had to drink and socialize because it would help her in the long run. So that's why they were brought in. And as I said, the judge ultimately ruled Taco Boy, their motion to dismiss is not going to happen. And so this will move forward. Now, there are video clips that have gone around from these different businesses, and according to the Post and Courier, there's a video that allegedly shows Komorowski showing up at the Drop-In around 7:50 p.m., drinking and leaving alone about an hour later. However, after that, she allegedly continued to bar hop, spending time at Snapper Jack's and the Crab Shack before heading home. So this ties into the bigger thing we've talked about with these lawsuits towards businesses, which has led to a rise in premiums and what they need to pay for insurance coverages, which is some businesses have outright said the insurance alone is making us have to close, or we may have to close because these rates are so astronomical. And where does liability lie when it comes to these situations? If someone walks into a bar, has a drink, walks out, and then spends the next 5 hours, just getting completely blasted at several different bars, does that first bar really have any culpability in the matter if they only served the person one drink? Where does that fall? And that's where a lot of these conversations have gone. So putting that aside, is this a situation where, was this her first stop? If it was, what liability does Taco Boy have? What liability does the drop-in have? Now, the drop-in for their side of things, they've already settled. But it's always interesting to see how these things will play out. Where does that liability lie when it comes to these businesses? Which business is responsible for making sure that someone doesn't drive their car? And at what point do they have to make that call? If someone comes in, orders a single drink, what is a business supposed to do? But that is a side conversation and argument for another day. So going back to this story, and to kind of wrap up everything with Komorowski, she's been charged with 1 count of reckless homicide and 3 counts of felony DUI for everything that allegedly happened back in April of 2023. Her criminal case is pending. She was ultimately released on a $150,000 bond on March 1st of this year. She had been in jail since the evening of the accident until that point. That was part of the deal that was laid out in her sentencing. If the trial didn't come up by a certain date, she was to be released. And there has been lots of stipulations about her release. So she's not just allowed to do whatever she wants. No, she's not in prison at the moment, but she's house arrest, can only leave for very specific things. So she's not out there just doing whatever she wants. Now, those other bars and some, and other defendants related to them have already settled with Hutchinson, agreeing to shell out about a total of $863,000. Obviously, this is all for compensation related to Miller's death. But as I mentioned, Taco Boy decided not to settle, filed this motion to have the case dismissed. And they are the only remaining defendant in the lawsuit, along with Komorowski herself, of course. Attorney Chase McNair said that Taco Boy mourns Miller's death, but the business had nothing to do with the circumstances, and so they will look to fight that in court. So once the judge denied Taco Boy's motion, he ordered that the parties that are involved complete all discovery by January 1st, 2025. So as far as this portion of, again, not the criminal case against Komorowski, but this part about the liability of bars and restaurants, we're not going to have really any movement barring some settlement or something that happens. There's always that chance, but assuming that doesn't happen, January 1st, 2025 is when discovery needs to be completed, and we might have some more news about what happens from there. But that's the latest on that. For now, it appears that this case will move forward, and we'll see if Taco Boy can prove that they had nothing to do with the death of Samantha Miller and shouldn't be held liable. And lastly, Crimestoppers of the Lowcountry will no longer be providing service to several counties here in South Carolina. As of the 1st of this month, those looking to submit a tip about any crimes for the following counties: Allendale, Bamberg, Berkeley, Charleston, Colleton, Dorchester, Hampton, and Jasper will have to go through local law enforcement. Temporarily, at least, service will continue for Beaufort, Georgetown, and Horry counties. Now, for those who aren't familiar, or maybe just know the name Crimestoppers, there's other programs in other communities around the country, but they're all community-driven initiatives that work with law enforcement to assist the public. Without the work of Crimestoppers or similar organizations, a lot of anonymous tips and rewards are not often feasible offers, to get people to report on crimes. For whatever reason, and those reasons vary, some people don't like dealing with police. They don't like calling into the office to give tips, even if they think it's the right thing to do. Having an organization like Crimestoppers was a way for people to stay anonymous, stay off police radar, and still be able to give tips. And, I don't have the numbers in front of me, but they have helped, I'm sure, numerous crimes, not just here in South Carolina or specifically the Lowcountry area, but throughout the nation. A lot of crimes may not have been solved or solved as quickly if it wasn't for these programs. Crimestoppers is a nationwide program. It's kind of like some other organizations you may be familiar with, where there's like the big brand name, Crimestoppers, and then there'll be offshoots of each. And although they operate under, the same types of procedures and things, they have different boards. They may have different procedures for, depending on the state and things. So just because the organization still exists doesn't mean these branches will continue on. And that's sort of what's happening here, where the South Carolina branch for those counties is no longer operational. Now, The Southeastern Crimestoppers Association obviously is part of what the Lowcountry Crimestoppers fell under. The treasurer for the association, her name is Ellen Westmoreland, and she had said that, you know, the Lowcountry covered 11 counties, which is a very large area. According to Westmoreland, it's a very large area specifically for one coordinator to cover. So they, despite closing, are still working with, you know, state council, city councils and things, and law enforcement in those 11 counties I mentioned, to maybe establish a more localized program. So just because having one coordinator covering multiple counties wasn't feasible, they're hopeful that they can, you know, bring on some more people, create a new program where there'll be more employees basically available to take tips and to help out from there. Now, they're a long ways from that becoming a reality. So for the time being, there really is no outlet besides contacting local law enforcement for any crimes, you know, any tips about crimes that you may want to provide. So that's what Westmoreland said they hope will happen. The South Carolina Crimestoppers Council, so obviously they oversee all the Crime Stoppers branches here in the state. They are encouraging community members to start a new program to cover their area. So they're encouraging it, but obviously when you remove the branch, you know, that's not helping things. But it was a decision they felt they needed to make, despite the good it does. And they're hopeful that maybe just because they were unable to do it under their current configuration, hopefully something will be created in these counties, whether it's each individual county or kind of like it was with them where there's a person oversees multiple. They're hopeful that this continues. And again, you know, a lot of people listening might say, well, what's the big deal? Just call regular police and give tips. But again, there's a lot of people who just refuse to do that for varying reasons, and programs like these are helpful. So I hope that there will be something that replaces this, because they have been helpful, not just here, but across the nation. So I'll be sure to keep you posted if anything is proposed or anything pops up that will replace it. But for now, Crime Stoppers is done in 11 counties here in South Carolina, and will likely be done in several others who still have temporary service. And at this time, we have nothing to replace it. That'll do it for this edition of Holy City Center Radio. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you have a great rest of your week. I can't wait to talk to you all again on Friday. Thank you to Lindsay Marie Collins with LMC Soundsystem for producing this and every episode of Holy City Center Radio, and Tyler Boone, whose music you hear in each and every show. I'll talk to you all on Friday, but until then, good night and good luck.